Welcome to Unspoken Affairs. It had been a long time since anyone had truly seen Alina. On the surface, her life appeared picture perfect. A comfortable home, a husband who worked tirelessly to provide for the family, and routines that seemed almost enviable from the outside. But behind closed doors, there were cracks invisible to most. She often felt like a shadow in her own life, overlooked, unheard, and yearning for something she couldn't quite define. David, her husband, was a good man, reliable, steady, hardworking, yet emotionally distant. Years of marriage had gradually stripped away the small moments of tenderness that once defined their relationship. The late-night talks had vanished, replaced by the glow of his laptop as he finished yet another report. The warm embraces had dwindled into quick, perfunctory gestures before leaving for work. Alina couldn't remember the last time she felt truly desired, the last time her presence had been met with more than a polite smile. So when Marcus entered her life, everything shifted. He wasn't a stranger, not exactly. He was a colleague of David's, someone who occasionally visited their home for dinners or to collaborate on projects. Marcus carried himself differently, confident, charismatic, always attentive. Where David's eyes skimmed past her, Marcus's gaze lingered, as though she were the only person in the room. He noticed things most people missed, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous, the hesitation in her voice when she deflected questions about her happiness, the fleeting sighs that escaped when she thought no one was listening. At first it was innocent enough. Light conversations while pouring drinks, casual laughter shared over harmless jokes, subtle acknowledgments that made Alina feel seen. But gradually, an unspoken current began to flow between them. Every glance felt charged, every word layered with meaning. For the first time in years, Lena felt alive again. She told herself it was nothing, that she was imagining it, that Marcus was simply kind. Yet the truth pressed against her heart each time he leaned just a little too close or brushed past her a little too slowly. She began to anticipate his visits, dressing with more care, rehearsing her words, even planning her days around the possibility of seeing him. Each interaction left her restless, filled with both excitement and guilt. One evening, when David was called away on a last-minute business trip, Marcus stopped by under the pretense of dropping off some documents. The air felt heavier than usual, charged with a tension neither dared acknowledge. Lena invited him in, trying to mask her nervousness with casual politeness. But the silence between them was different, this time thicker, harder to ignore. They sat in the living room, the dim glow of the lamp casting long shadows across the walls. Conversation stumbled, faltered, and finally gave way to silence. Marcus looked at her, and for the first time she couldn't look away. His eyes held something she hadn't seen in years: desire, longing, a hunger that mirrored her own. Her breath caught, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause. Elena's heart raced as memories of her unfulfilled marriage surged forward. The loneliness, the unspoken words, the countless nights spent feeling invisible. All of it collided with the present moment, with Marcus sitting inches away, offering her something she had desperately craved. She knew this was dangerous. She knew the line she was standing on could never be uncrossed. And yet the temptation was overwhelming. She shifted slightly, her hands trembling as she clasped them together. Marcus leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to keep pretending," he said softly, words cutting through the silence like a blade. Those words shattered the last of her defenses. Pretending, that was exactly what she had been doing day after day, year after year. Pretending to be content. Pretending that the emptiness didn't gnaw at her. Pretending that David's absence hadn't hollowed her out. And now here was someone who saw it, who acknowledged it, who offered her a chance, however fleeting, to feel alive again. The moment that followed wasn't loud or dramatic, was quiet, almost tender. A confession shared in the language of silence and stolen glances. A choice made not with words, but with the simple act of not turning away, What happened that night was not something Alina could ever fully explain. It wasn't just about Marcus, it was about the years of longing, the ache of neglect, the hunger for something more. And though part of her felt liberated, another part was instantly crushed under the weight of guilt. When Marcus finally left, Alina stood in the quiet of her living room, the echoes of her decision wrapping around her like a suffocating blanket. She stared at the walls, the furniture, the familiar spaces of her home that suddenly felt foreign. Nothing looked different, yet everything had changed. The following days were a blur of conflicting emotions. She smiled at David when he returned, pretending nothing had happened, but inside she was unraveling. Every time she looked at him, the guilt surged. Yet so did the reminder of why she had crossed that line in the first place. She felt both alive and broken, liberated and imprisoned. Marcus continued to linger in her life. But things were never the same. The tension between them grew heavier, no longer unspoken but undeniable. Each interaction carried the weight of secrets, the burden of choices they couldn't undo. Alina found herself caught in a storm of emotions, desire, guilt, fear, longing, and each day became a battle between what she wanted and what she knew was right. She replayed that night in her mind constantly, torn between regret and nostalgia. Had she made a mistake? Or had she simply answered the call of her own neglected heart? The questions haunted her, their answers shifting with every sunrise. At night, lying beside David, she wondered if he sensed it. If he noticed the way she flinched at his touch, the way her eyes lingered elsewhere, the way her silence seemed heavier than usual. She wondered if he could feel the distance that had quietly grown between them, the wall that she had built with her own choices. Weeks turned into months, and the weight of the secret became unbearable. Alina knew she couldn't carry it forever. The guilt seeped into everything: her words, her actions, her very being. She had betrayed not just David, but herself. She had crossed a line she once believed unbreakable, and now she was left to navigate the consequences. The confession came one evening, unplanned but inevitable. The words tumbled out of her in a flood of tears and trembling breaths. She told David everything, not the details, but enough to shatter him, enough to fracture the life they had built together. His silence was worse than anger, worse than rage. It was the silence of someone who had been blindsided. Someone who couldn't reconcile the person he loved with the betrayal he had just heard. In the aftermath, their home became a battlefield of quiet avoidance and unspoken pain. Alina didn't expect forgiveness, and David didn't offer it. The damage was done, the trust broken. Whether they would ever recover was a question neither of them could answer. Alina often found herself reflecting on the choices that led her there. She wondered if the fleeting moments of feeling alive were worth the devastation that followed. She questioned whether her loneliness justified her betrayal, or if she had simply been too weak to endure it any longer. Her story was not one of villains and heroes, but of flawed humans making flawed choices. A story of yearning, of vulnerability, of the dangerous power of feeling unseen. And though she couldn't undo the past, she carried its lessons with her. That silence in a relationship can be just as destructive as words that neglect can be, as painful as betrayal, and that sometimes the deepest wounds are the ones we inflict upon ourselves. In the end, Elena's life was forever changed, not just by what happened with Marcus, but by the realization of what had been missing all along. Her confession was not just to David, but to herself, that she had needs, desires, and a voice that could no longer be ignored.